Good evening, everyone. I'm Bernie Ferrari, the Dean of the Carey Business School at Johns Hopkins University. Welcome. Welcome to our 24th floor. I'm pleased to welcome you to the annual Alan L. Berman Lecture. It's one of the preeminent events of the Edward St. John Real Estate Program here at the Carey Business School. Alan and his wife, Jean, both who have passed away, greatly valued scholarship and education and gave freely of their time and resources to many institutions throughout their hometown of Baltimore. The Bermans' generosity has helped guide not only our real estate program, but also our entire school, and we're very grateful for their generosity. Tonight we have with us Toby Bozzuto, President and Chief Executive Officer of the Bozzuto Group. The Bozzuto Group is a diversified real estate company, as we will learn, with businesses in development and construction and home building and property management. The firm was founded in 1988 by Tom Bozzuto, Toby's father, and several partners, including Rick Moyston, who was a graduate of our finance program before we became the Carey Business School. Today, Toby provides the day-to-day leadership of the firm, more than 2,500 employees in 11 states in the District of Columbia. The company prides itself on a strong corporate culture and creating extraordinary experiences for residents and clients and partners. For 2 years in a row, the Washington Post has named the Bozzuto Group as a top workplace based solely on employee feedback and submissions. Mr. Bozzuto is also committed to advancing diversity throughout all levels of the workplace as a proud sponsor of the CEO of Action for Diversity and Inclusion Pledge. Among his many honors, he is a recipient of the William Donald Schaefer Industrialist of the Year Award, and he was named Developer of the Year by the District of Columbia Building Industry and the Maryland Building Industry Associations. He's also active in the community, a member of the Board of Trustees for Colgate University, the Kennedy Krieger Institute, and the Gilman School. Leading our discussion is another preeminent player in the real estate world, and that's Mr. Jeffrey Olson, the chairman of the Carey Business School's Real Estate Advisory Board. And he's the chairman and chief executive officer of Urban Edge Properties, which spun off from Vornado Realty Trust in 2015. Previously, he served as chief executive officer of Equity One. Jeff earned his Master's of Science in Real Estate from Johns Hopkins University and was previously a certified public accountant. Please welcome both of them to our stage.
Great. Good evening. Toby, we are delighted to have you. When Bernie was talking about all your accomplishments, I'm like, how in the world do you have time to do all this? There's a lot that you're responsible for, and your company is a pretty amazing company. Bernie mentioned I'm a former CPA a long time ago. This is back in 1986. I did audits, and I remember looking at K-1s for your father when I was an auditor at Resnick, Feder, and Silverman, when we were auditing Oxford at the time. So the Bozzuto name goes a long way back for me. So I'd love for you to spend some time just talking about your journey to the real estate world and how you got there, what you like about it, and I'd like you to spend a few minutes.
Sure. First of all, thank you, Dean, for the introduction, and thank you all for coming tonight. It's really an honor to be here, and I hear those awards, and whereas ostensibly they're for me, they're really for my company, and there's some folks here from my company tonight. So I've had the privilege of being a second generation in a business. My father, Tom, who some of you may know, started our company in 1988, so 30 years ago in April of this year. And I've been working with him and have enjoyed working with him for 17 years. And we were speaking in the elevator that's somewhat of an anomaly to both work with your father that long and for it to be successful. we're going to the football game on Sunday together. And he said, well, why do you want to go with me instead of bringing your son? And I said, because I miss talking to you. So we have a relationship that has transcended personal one. It's gone to business and then full circle back to personal. My journey is a little different maybe than some in real estate, but as many of you know, the real estate business is not like a medical profession where you have to have one particular degree, perhaps other than the Hopkins degree. You can come to it many different ways. I was a musician in high school and in college at Colgate University, and ended up going into the music business of all things, and thought I could combine my love of business with music. And that's a case of it's better sometimes not to know how the sausage is made. And in my early 20s realized that whereas I enjoyed it, it wasn't going to be a good career path. And came to my father, and I give him all the kudos in the world that he had theretofore never asked me if I was interested in getting into the business. And people assume, perhaps because of his success, that that would have been a natural conversation. He said, not only was he surprised that I wanted to get into the business, but he said, I don't want you to work here until, and he listed a number of criteria, one of which was work somewhere else in real estate for a few years. And I worked for a mortgage banking business in Washington, D.C. for 3.5 years. Go to graduate school. And my apologies to Hopkins, but I went to NYU. The downside there being, and we were talking about this, that I don't have a great network in Maryland from graduate school, because that network has largely been up where you are in New York. And the third criteria was, of course, that then and only then I would start at the bottom of the organization. So I did that, and the rest has been a wonderful journey. We've, as I mentioned.
And the bottom of the organization was what?
Well, in my case, I was interested in development. We have a number of different businesses, and I'm sure we'll talk about that. But I was interested in the creativity of the development side. I found that it married up quite well with my music minor, English major type thinking, and allowed me to be creative. So I started as what we call a development associate, which you may call an analyst. I know people have different names for it. Working for others, working for other developers within the shop. And I learned everything from where to get permits and how to work with an architect through the beginning to the end of a process, and ultimately ran that division 10 years later, let's say, for maybe 6 years. I ran it. And that was wonderful for me. So.
Great. Let's talk about your dad for a little bit. I understand
Great.
he wrote a book.
He did.
The book is called Reflections of an Ordinary Man.
Yes.
So maybe you can tell us a little bit about him, what made him who he is, and how that's going to get passed on to likely future generations, including
Hopefully.
Maybe even your kids.
Thank you. Well, if I do an advertisement for his book, maybe he'll buy me a hot dog or a beer at the game on Sunday. So please tell him I advertised his book. My father wrote a book ostensibly for the employees of our organization. And it was a book, throughout his life he's written down, I'll use the word aphorisms perhaps in lieu of anything else, but they're thoughts or thinking about his life, or really how we lead our business life, which is hopefully with deep integrity. And he had given a variant of that book to myself and my sister when we went to college, and it was very personal, in some ways private advice. He has continued to do that since 20, 30 years ago when we went to school, and continued to write and put it together to celebrate our 30th anniversary, and gave it to our employees as a gift. And there had been enough interest in it, or nice feedback, that he's decided to publish it. And you can, here's the commercial, you can get it on Amazon.com. Or just call him, he'll probably send you a free copy. I'd be delighted to speak to you. So it's been wonderful, and it's these are sort of nuggets of information, and he has a way of distilling these large pictures and bringing them into these just simple, I don't mean to use the word simple in a derogatory way, but maybe elegant thoughts. So I will still call him. He doesn't come to work every day. He'll come in maybe once a week, but I'll call him every couple days or every day, and his ability to give me these little nuanced bits of information that would take me an hour and a half to describe is quite a talent and something I appreciate.
So I'm sure he had a lot to do with forming the culture of your organization,
Yeah.
but you've had a lot to do with it as well, especially
you.
now. So maybe you can dig in a little bit on culture and what does it mean to be a Bozzuto employee?
Sure. Like any company, or I'd like to think any company, we started with values that have driven our growth and our decision-making on a daily basis. They're the same value. He started the company with these 4 values, and I've taken the baton of this business and enforced those. But we basically believe that we are in the business. I don't think of myself as being in the apartment business or the home building business or the management business or construction. Those are our 4 businesses. My dad and I think of ourselves as being in the business of creating sanctuary. It's a very grandiose word, I'll admit, but I'm an English major.
I love that word.
And that's what you're going to get. If you believe that you're creating sanctuary instead of 4 walls and carpet, you've created something for your customer that's important, that matters. And it's not different than when you take your wife to a nice dinner. You wear a little nicer clothes, you maybe treat each other a little better, listen more, and you pay more too. Yet when you pay that check, you don't feel like you've been taken. You don't feel like you have not gotten a value. And what we believe, and I'm getting back to culture, is that if we always do the right thing for our customer and we create this sanctuary, and we believe that we have this ridiculous gift and blessing of being able to do this for a living, then the net effect is we have very happy customers. And we have employees that embody those values. And when they go to hire new people, they're hiring people that sort of success begets success, but kindness begets kindness. So they're hiring people that share that value system. And every once in a while, we'll get it wrong. And that person usually quits and says, we don't understand them, or they just end up outside of the organization. But if I've heard the word double bottom line described. It's where you have a profit-driven business with perhaps social goals is another effect of it. I very much see what we do in that way, that I don't wake up in the morning, nor do I think my associates, and think, how much money can we make? We think, what can we do to change community? And then in our management business, how can we change your life? So if you're one of my residents, how can I make your day better? You do that, and we'll do that the best we can, but that's allowed us at least to have this success to date.
I love the kindness begets kindness, because it's not very common in our industry. And I happen to have exactly the same philosophy. But I believe kindness wins deals at the end of the day, and it wins employees for the long run. But do you find it a rarity in the industry? And is it hard to find people that are kind, that fit into your culture?
Well, we believe, first of all, I agree with you that it's a rarity to at least admit that that's a desirable quality in business, which is such a shame. I was invited to speak to Harvard's Business School, their master's program, and everyone was staring at me, and they said, we love that you're talking about heart-driven or mind-driven or kindness-driven leadership, because they said, you're the first guy that's ever come in here and said that.
Yeah.
And there's probably extraordinarily successful people that had been there before, and they may do better than I financially, but they were almost enthralled by the idea that you can work for a company that at least that is driven by values greater than just making profit. The dirty secret, of course, being that, using my nice restaurant example, we charge more.
Totally.
So the Bozzuto apartments that we developed or manage in, let's use Baltimore since we're sitting here, are at a 20%, 15 to 20% premium for rent than those competitors. But I would argue that you're getting an experience that is at least as commensurate for what you're paying. So this idea that kindness is something that you can allow into leadership, I don't conflate that with weakness. I actually think it's strength. And I think, without getting political, in today's current political environment, the bully pulpit of leadership has been used literally like a bully, where a bully pulpit instead can be used to spread good words or do good things.
Agreed. All right, let's talk about the real estate space. Where do you think we are in the cycle right now?
We're in whatever place the Orioles are in right now, and not the Red Sox. Everyone uses innings, so I defaulted to a baseball analogy. I believe we are the apartment sector in Baltimore, in my opinion, is very overbuilt, and to some degree in Washington. There's been a reticence of capital to do new deals because I believe they share a similar sentiment, and that I think will slow things down and will allow the market to breathe. The market, in my case, being the residential market. I know you have a slightly different perspective in your business. So where I think we are is that fewer starts will happen. Rents will plateau as they have been for a little while and then increase as supply is diminished. I think we're in a rising interest rate environment, no surprise there. That will affect our business and on the home building side as to what people can afford. And whereas we're at full employment, there has not been a lot of income growth. So what you're seeing is a whole bunch of blah. It's just flat. We've had flat rents in the apartment sector for 4 or 5 straight years. You know more than anyone probably in this room about the retail business, and so I don't need to tell you, but the retail business is relatively anemic. And the net effect, I don't mean to sound so depressing. I'm really excited for the future because you do have, the positives are that we have the baby boom demographic and the millennial demographic, like 2 camel humps going through the system here. And they're incredible, and they're not waning. There are opportunities galore in both spaces. I would just posit that today it pays to be more mindful of where we are, and the idea of just developing to develop is not prudent, in my opinion.
Yeah. Any particular sub-markets that you love today?
Yeah. The majority of our business, at least the development business, is in Washington, D.C., and I live in Baltimore, and I live in Baltimore City, actually, albeit right on the edge of the city and the county. And as much as I want to say Baltimore, I believe that D.C. has far greater momentum at the moment. My response to that, though, with respect to Baltimore, to those of you here from Baltimore, is it's a little cliche. It's like, be the change you want to see. Instead of lamenting what's not right about Baltimore, how about we do something about it? And as we sit in this beautiful building, I look out the window and get to see Spinnaker Bay, which we did, and Anthem House across the street, and a number of other things. And you say, well, I guess we could have just said this is nothing but a parking lot, where I used to park in high school when I went to bars underage in Fells Point. You all remember this was a desolate parking lot where you could park for free because it was so dangerous. So you run over to Fells Point. And now here we are in this wonderful school, in this wonderful building. So it shows you the power of what we do for a living. So I'm more bullish on DC. DC using a term in a very macro sense, that DC includes suburban Maryland. We just started a project in Chevy Chase, Maryland, which of course is right on the district line. And then all the way out to Dulles and past Dulles. And then if Amazon does end up being in the area where I think they're going to be, which would be Northern Virginia, that's my guess, I think that will just put even more gasoline in the tank of suburban DC.
Yep, that would be great.
Yeah.
New hires, what do you look for in terms of people? And are you hiring?
Yeah. We're hiring all the time. We had an intern program this summer with 72 interns.
Wow.
And we offered 75% of them. And I hope for any of you whose children were in that program that you weren't in the 25% that we didn't offer. We offered them jobs in October, as in now, with the thinking that when they graduate in May, if they've committed to me the way athletes commit to, high school athletes commit to colleges, then they'll have a great senior year thanks to me, so they'll probably like me by the time they show up. But more, all joking aside, that we'll have wonderful new blood in the company. This is particularly germane to our management business, which we are in the property management business. And that requires a tremendous amount of new employees. We look, again, using the word kind, my father's always said to me, here's one of his aphorisms, you have to hire nice because, he calls it nice, because you can't teach nice. You can teach anyone nice skills. So the thesis being, don't just hire someone that's great for the job because they meet the criteria, but if their personality is a certain way, then you can train them the rest of the way. We're building a building, I guess out this window, called Liberty. And one of the guys running that job, one of my dad's original partners, was working out at a gym in Annapolis. And this guy at the front desk was this unbelievable guy. And he was always polite, and he was always asking questions to this gentleman. And we hired him, and he started at the bottom of our construction company, and now he is running huge, huge projects.
You know, there's a guy in my parking garage where I live, and he's the nicest guy as a parking attendant. There are a lot of mean parking attendants in New York.
Yes.
But you've acted as a catalyst. I'm going to ask him
You should.
to see if he wants a job in my company.
I think you should.
I think it's a good
I think
idea.
if
I've been
you-
thinking about it,
instinctually,
but
right?
you have now, so we'll see. He'll be CEO of the company in 10 years.
Yeah,
and then
be
we'll
careful
come
what
back
you wish for.
If you were sitting in the audience and you were going through either graduate school or undergrad and you wanted to be in the real estate business, what would you be thinking about? Where would your head be? What would you focus on?
I would recommend, well, a couple things. I think it's an unbelievable business. You and I have been blessed. I mean, I should be interviewing him, by the way, just if anyone didn't know that. We've been blessed with careers that are fun, exciting, challenging, and we're in the business at the end of the day of creating something tangible, which to our finance friends, whereas their job is equally important, there's less tangible evidence of the outcome. And when you're in the spaces that we're in, you're able to see the results and feel them and point to them. So I think it's a tremendously rich industry, and it's rich in the sense that you truly can impact community. Here in Baltimore, of course, we had the Freddie Gray riots. The day that Freddie Gray's funeral happened, we broke ground. Everybody in the national news was saying Baltimore's done, everything. CVS is literally on fire, right? We broke ground on a project called Anthem House that I mentioned before. It's a $125 million project on one block, on one street, in one part of Baltimore. That's my answer. It's definitely not the answer. I mean, it's all I know how to do, so that was my little answer. But the point being that you can effectuate change almost in any part of the sector that you go in and be a party to. That project needed bankers and engineers and architects and lawyers and consultants, and we all touched it. And did we change the world? No. But are the lights on there tonight?
Yeah.
Yes. In fact, I put a pretty garish sign on the roof, so the lights are literally very on. I tried to have Hopkins colors for tonight. I don't know if they got my voicemail. So we'll see when we walk out. But we have been, that site had been a vacant parking lot for 40 years, and for those of you with longer memories, had been a GE plant before. So the highest and best use that they had been able to come up with was a deeply industrial and deeply highly polluting industrial plant. We remediated the site. We built an apartment building. You could eat dinner there tonight. You could work off your dinner with bar or whatever the classes are they teach there that I don't quite understand. And it's a community. And then we just built a small little building next door and so on. But then the really cool part is other developers are building things around. And whereas the competitor of me doesn't like that, the urbanist in me loves it, or the Baltimore guy loves it, because someone else picked up. I mean, Avalon is building 100 yards from here, and they're a direct competitor, and I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
Because they're doing it.
Now, I would agree in the improving communities. We recently in the Bronx, which is full of these overpriced bodegas, we opened up the first ShopRite about 6 months ago. And this is a conventional grocery store serving hundreds of thousands of people that previously had not been served. And on that day of opening, I mean, people were crying in the neighborhood. Pastors were praying for us in the neighborhood. So yeah, it was exactly what you can't you can't put a value on that. So anyway, I'd like to leave enough time for questions. So I'd like
Great.
to open it up now for questions and be delighted to take any.
Thank you. Who's going to be brave?
I know this isn't your spot in the market, but there's a lot of talk about affordability of housing. So do you have any thoughts about that and the financing structure that sort of drives or doesn't drive affordability?
Sure. Would you like me to answer?
Absolutely.
Okay. Did everyone hear the question? The question was about, effectively, if I may, about my thoughts on affordability. So when we build a new building today, a 2x4 does not care whether it's in the world's most expensive home or the cheapest home. It costs exactly the same. So in other words, to buy a 2x4, to build the Liberty next door, a person building an affordable community down the street is the same cost for materials. So the economics of what you can charge are clearly, definitively challenged. Labor, tariffs, a number of other factors have created a pricing model that is so expensive. So to build new stuff, put simplistically, is so expensive that the ability to deliver something that is truly affordable is extraordinarily difficult. So we turn to the government and we use 9% tax credits. Well, that's great, except that the program is extremely small and the demand is outrageously large. Our current administration contemplated cutting the LIHTC program, which I was 1,000% against. They didn't, which is great, but it is still a finite. If you think about costs going up and the sources to cover that being finite, so the net result is that we are able to provide affordable housing through a modicum of inclusionary zoning, but that's just a drop in the bucket. That's like 5, 10, 15% of your units. That doesn't, unfortunately, fix the problem. I personally believe that the existing housing stock is how you solve the problem. You don't, as long as that housing stock is in safe and respectful neighborhoods that give people the dignity of a place to live, they need to live close to where they work. Living close to where you work should not be the provenance of the rich. And we've seen, regrettably, you have to go, like in London, you drive an hour and a half or take a 2-hour train if you're a housekeeper to get into London. In Manhattan, that's not entirely dissimilar now to what you live in past Flushing, but now you go even past Flushing, that's too expensive now.
Yeah.
And so the answer is so difficult. And you all are smarter than I am, and there's a lot of, it's just important to be aware of the fact that not all developers are trying to exclude affordable housing as part of their job. It's just that for a for-profit business like my own, it's very, very difficult. We have chosen to do one affordable deal a year and compete for tax credits like everybody else. with the underlying thesis that every human being should be provided the very best housing for at whatever income level they're at. And I believe if you looked at some of our affordable projects that we've done, you would have a hard time discerning whether it was affordable or not. So it comes down to the dignity of where people live, giving people dignity. But at the end of the day, the problem is insanely difficult. I don't want to get political, and I won't, but the city council here in Baltimore recently pushed an affordable housing agenda, and you all should study whether that's going to be effective or ineffective. The jury is presumably still out. And I think it came from an incredibly good place. So the question will be, was it the right thing to do or the right way to do it? And I don't know. But it's very, very difficult. So, does anyone have an easier question?
Toby, we're hearing a lot about how technology is changing the real estate business, both in terms of how users of real estate consume it and the patterns of demand and the magnitude of demand and how it's changed by the sharing economy notions. Also, how technology is changing how we run real estate businesses themselves and how we serve our customers. How is Bozzuto tackling this? How are you paying attention to technology, and how have you? What particular technologies are you seeing that are exciting about how your business is being run?
Yeah, that's a great question. Technology has strangely been really slow to be adopted in our industry. If the automobile industry has been disrupted with Uber, et cetera, Uber and Lyft, the automobile industry, the hotel business has been disrupted by Airbnb, yet the residential business, the most exciting thing we can come up with is instead of a 12-month lease, you can have a 13-month lease. And you go, oh, wow, we're really crazy. I believe our industry will be disrupted by allowing, we as the younger people are, the less stuff they're carrying around. Perhaps the less stuff we're carrying around. We've accumulated more stuff over our years, but if you're in your 20s, you have less stuff and less things, and the majority of what you have is now on your phone, other than perhaps your clothing. And I believe that housing that we provide will ultimately not be 12-month leases, but you will buy chunks of time. And I don't mean an hour or 2 hours, of course. Somebody else in that business. I mean 3 months, 4 months. So if you had a professor that was here for 1 semester, or someone that needed medical care at Hopkins, that instead of renting 4 rooms at the Four Seasons to put up their family, could rent an apartment for a shorter duration. So to answer your question more directly, we are trying to get ahead of that by exploring where this could go and how to get in front of it. We, of course, have the normal answer, which is apps to pay for things. We were one of the first developers in the country we've actually partnered with Amazon and become one of their first partners in the country, and they put those those Amazon lockers to be the receiver of all these packages, because if you remember, my business is predicated on treating your customer well and standing up when they get in and recognizing them. But if my people are bent over sorting packages 24 hours a day, they're not able to do their core job. So we are exploring technology, everything from how to make our customers' lives easier, how to give them back time. Time is the one thing that none of us can. If you can get a gift of time, I think that would be one of the greatest gifts. So how do we make your life more convenient? And we now have a full-time innovation person. It's like bringing your car to the mechanic. I have no idea what they do, but they're telling me it's very important. No, her job is to study where we're going and again, how to get ahead of it.
Have you seen We Live yet?
Yes.
What do you think?
I think it's fascinating. I think it's great. We've seen We Live. We've seen Y Hotel. We've seen a variant of Y Hotel. There are people coming to us saying, you have an apartment building of 300 units opening tomorrow. You're going to lease 20 a month in your very best case. So that leaves half of the units empty for the first year, and you're getting no income, and they come in and they operate a hotel in that space. Your mind can run now because there's a lot of problems with it. It's brilliant and elegant under one solution, but it introduces a transient element under another. Similarly, Airbnb does the same. But people used to say, I would never get into a car with a stranger and don't meet a stranger on the internet and never get in anyone strange's car. And now you're going on the internet to get into strange people's car. So I don't think just because we think it's something today that it can't change.
Yep.
So that's a perfect example.
Yep.
We live is fascinating.
Yep. Yep.
So one quick follow-up. What about construction, and particularly the ability of innovative technologies in construction to help address affordability?
Yeah, I'm glad you compared the two, because we're going to see construction, something's got to give. And if labor is continually diminished by either too much supply, by immigration laws, by lack of good tradespeople, which is a whole nother issue, then we're going to continue to have an inability to provide affordable housing to those that need it. So construction technology, in the face of all that other stuff, is maybe the one thing or one tool that can be used to lower the cost to provide the very same goal. So we are looking at and working with everything from modular construction to some of these new businesses like Conterra that are contemplating building full buildings in a factory. Jury's still out, but I think over time someone will dominate that space, and that industry too is being disrupted, and that should work to the benefit of affordable renters. I'm hoping.
Other questions?
Anyone else?
Toby, over the time that you've been at Bozzuto, the company's changed a lot. You guys have made huge progression in terms of how we amenitize buildings, how we think about the experience of the end user. Could you talk a little bit about how you've been able to successfully bring the culture of your company along and get everybody thinking along those same lines of how do we keep striving to do more and do better every day?
Yeah, so thank you so much for saying that. I believe it's like your children, where they rise to the lowest bar you set, or the highest bar you set, I should say, right? If you set it here, they rise higher. And there was a belief in Baltimore when we did Spinnaker Bay. It was the first high-rise apartment building in Baltimore that had been done, and candidly, in 30 years. And the 30 years prior ones were not intended for luxury residential. And what we thought is, if we can give people I'm an experienced person. I use the analogy of going to a dinner before. But if you walk into a space, if these windows were open and you didn't have to look at me, I can assure you that this lecture would be more interesting. But when you're in an environment that has an uplifting quality, if you're in this room versus the basement, you feel a certain way. I don't understand why more developers don't tap into the sort of the human zeitgeist of what you feel. Because if you can tap into here, then you're tapping into here. And if you don't believe me, look at these incredible hotels, these boutique hotels. If you walk into the Four Seasons across the street, you have a different, you feel different perhaps than you would at the Marriott Courtyard. Now they both serve a purpose and they're different costs, et cetera. But what you've noticed, and I appreciate you noticing, is that we go a little nuts on the interior. My friend Marcy, who's an interior designer, likes that fact that I go a little nuts in that arena. But what we do is, I want you to walk in and forget that you came there to rent an apartment and decide you want to live there by the time you're halfway to the elevator. And I think I can get you with authentic experience. Inauthenticity, however, does not do the same. So what we'll do something, or another great, I don't know that we're a great developer, but another developer will do something. You'll watch a lot of people hire our same designers and try to mimic the same thing. But if your team doesn't get around it, there's no magic. We bought a piece of land over here in Fells Point and did a project called Union Wharf. And the day I got it, I wrote the architect a letter in the middle of the night, and I said, this is what I think it should be. And then he took it to a whole nother level. And then the interior designer took it to an even better level. And I get the credit, which is absurd. This aggregate group of people were inspired. The same group of people have worked for other developers, and you'll walk in and it's just not quite the same. So I think if you put your heart behind what you do, and the great news there is it's lasting and it's different and it means something. That's our business model. There's a place for commodity people too. I don't like those guys, but.
Well, Toby, thank you so much for sharing your
Yes.
night with us, and I think there will be drinks afterwards. And
Great. Thank you all
we
so
really
much.
appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
The good news about standing up here last is I get to ask the last question. And Toby, you mentioned two humps, millennials and baby boomers. Lindsay and I belong to the latter. So have you looked into housing for the aged? Not that we're there in any way, shape, or form.
Well, if we're alive.
Yeah.
No, can you hear me? Did I turn this off? I was
No,
still on.
you're
We hired a firm called IDEO, and IDEO it's an incredible company you should look into that helps people design and brand products. And they said, why the hell are you calling us as a real estate developer? And I said, that's exactly why, because no one else did. And they helped us create a senior living brand called Canvas. And the idea is Canvas is you have some extra time when you retire. How are you going to paint your canvas? Do you like to work in a garage or garden, or or spend time with your grandchildren, et cetera? So we provided a 55-plus apartment product that doesn't have wheelchairs and medical devices, and the intention is not for you to feel old in that environment because you are not old at that age. Our average age is 72. And we started our first one. We partnered there with the Carlyle Group in DC. We did one in Valley Forge, Pennsylvania, and it's under lease up. And if you're curious, take a look. I'm sure there's a website, Canvas Valley Forge. And it looks like a very beautiful apartment building, but it has more features that would cater to your needs, like a dining room where you can have guests, a place for your grandchildren to play on video games, and you don't have to keep your own video machine in your apartment. And it's elegant, and it respects people versus assume that they are going to be old like everyone else.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
We appreciate you coming.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.